I'm not an expert in any kind of education. I'm not an expert in building. I don't actually really enjoy traveling, and I don't think I'm that much of a compassionate person. But I'm going to tell you the story of how I've built a school in India, what I've learnt about myself and the world around me, and what I'm going to do from here. So, to take it forward, 7 years ago is where my story started. I was a university student at UTS, and a professor of mine told me, if you want to get involved in international poverty reduction, don't do it from a high-rise in New York or Geneva. He said, get to the developing world, get your hands dirty, and see what you can find. So that's exactly what I did. I went to India for no other reason than it seemed like a pretty cool place to go. And it would have been probably the third night when I was traveling between Delhi and Agra. It was a dark night, and my girlfriend was in the back seat. And she started sniffling. And after a couple of minutes, she said, "This sucks. This really sucks." She said, "We're able to come over here and put this screen around us and pretend that what we're seeing isn't actually affecting us. We can jump on a plane and go home. When we get home, we can flip the page in the newspaper or change a channel on the television. We can pretend that what we're seeing doesn't actually exist." In questioning that screen that we put around us, we decided to go down to Bangalore, where we found an opportunity to volunteer with this organisation that was doing this project for these children coming from granite quarries. Now, outside Bangalore, there are about 200 of these granite quarries. And in the quarries, we're talking people working for $1.80 a day. They work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, living in huts in a slum that have nothing more than no running water, no electricity, and no sanitation facility. And so, when we were going down there, we got all inspired. We came back to Sydney and we thought, what can we do to help them? And in our humble wisdom at the age of 20 years old, we thought, we'll build them a school. How good's that? We don't know anything about building, don't know anything about education, but let's build them a school. Okay, no business experience, no idea about how to build a business, no idea about how to fundraise, no idea about how to go about construction in India. In fact, we called it the 40K Foundation because we only thought it was going to cost $40,000 to build this thing. Whoops. Anyway, 2 years in, we're trying to develop that empathy that I felt that I needed to really understand what it was that we were going to be doing over there. So a couple of years after I went to India for the first time, I actually went and lived with the quarry workers. Now, my home for that short time became a hut with a bare floor. Work there involved getting up at about 5 o'clock in the morning and all day, every day, just smashing up rock with a chisel and hammer, just like you'd pretty much see in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Now, on the third night, this family invited me in for dinner, and I've never been more humbled in my life. You see, when I went in there, you can see that they're sitting on a bare floor. Well, that's because they'd folded their one and only family mat 4 times for me to sit on. The dinner was served to me. It was a plate of rice with just a very basic South Indian curry called sambar on top. Now, sambar is just, for these people, just a couple of chopped up vegetables with a dash of water. After dinner was the entertainment. And when we went down there, we get out of the hut, and the entertainment was watching the planes land at the Bangalore airport. Now, you can imagine these kids jumping up and down, getting excited by these lights flying across the sky. But I'm sitting there just thinking, if I was up there, if I was in one of those planes right now, then all I would see is darkness. And it made me think, the people we're seeing here, they're forgotten. They're living in darkness. Now, the next morning, I resumed my work in the quarry. And one of the guys down there was like an Indian father to me. His name was Swami. He'd been there now for years. And at about 7 o'clock, my hand's blistered. I'm starving because I only have 2 meals a day. We go and have tea. And as the tea's boiling, Swami pulls down a red plastic bucket that had all his earthly possessions in it. And there were 3 things. The first was a motorcycle mirror. The second was a broken hairbrush. And the third was a family photo album. And I sat there flipping through these unfamiliar faces as Swami, a man who'd worked in this quarry for 30 years, sat there, mirror in one hand, brush in the other, combing his hair and combing his moustache. And as he was doing it, I thought to myself, you know what? This guy's just like me. The values he's showing is just like me. Pride in your family and pride in your personal appearance. Didn't matter that this guy was going to go and break rock for the next 12 hours that day. Anyway, we'd been in there, I'd had this fantastic experience, and I thought that was going to give me the high that I needed to persevere through a project that I was really, really struggling with. And before I'd started 40K, I was quite an even-tempered character. But when I started doing these massive roller coasters where the highs would be absolutely euphoric, but the lows would be unbearable. And I was in a low. And the reason I was in a low was because I was thinking, I'm putting my life into this project, and it's only going to be impacting 200 kids. There are 8 million children in India who aren't being educated, and all this work we were going into was really not going to make any difference whatsoever. So I thought, why bother? But it's amazing what kind of turns you out of those troughs sometimes, because that was at the time that the US presidential primary was happening back in 2008. And Hillary Clinton had spoken to a journalist one morning, and she'd been battered by the campaign trail. The journalist asked her, how do you keep going? And Hillary Clinton looked straight back at her with tears coming down her face. And she just said, I just keep going. That night, I made a promise to myself that no matter what, I was just going to keep going. And I'm happy that I did, because 2 years later, the school opened. Now, let me show you a clip from the opening day.
We'd now like to declare the Banyan open.
Sometimes I feel like throw my hands up in the air.
I want everyone in India to see this as a statement of what Australians really think about India.
You've got the love I need to see me through. You got the love. You got the love. You got the love.
When we come over here, you completely change the outlook that we have on the planet and the outlook of what we want to do with ourselves. When I started this thing, I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. I was in law school. These guys changed me into a full-time volunteer to get this thing up and running. So I can't thank you guys enough. We called it the Banyan School because the banyan is one of the only trees on the planet where the roots actually grow from branches rather than come from the ground up. That had been our story, really. The whole thing came from this idea for a project, and we actually got that done. But when it opened, it really, really didn't start to hit us until the first children actually started walking through the days of the school. And that only happened a month ago, in June 2011. And we'd handed the project back to the local partner, and I'll pick up an email that I got from our project manager on the ground, because I think he explains it best. G'day, Clary. Had to share with you. This week I've been picking up and returning the kids from our first quarry. You know the one. Monday we went and were able to extract 5 tearful kids from their mothers. Tuesday, I wandered through the huts and finally emerged with 6 very reluctant kids sobbing all the way to the banyan. Yesterday morning, a couple of the kids were standing around the pickup point curiously and even ran to fetch the others. This morning as I rounded the pickup, I was greeted by the sight of 8 beautifully dressed children, satchels on back, all waiting for me with smiles on their faces. Add another 2 parents who asked about sending their children too. We drove to the Banyan with Mark Knopfler blaring on the radio, the kids bopping away in the back seat, and me with tears of joy streaming down my face. I couldn't help myself. This is the culmination of your dream here. I know 40K will continue to grow and help many, many kids all over the world. But for me, this was the fulfillment of our first project in India. Happy kids getting an education, a hot lunch in safety and surrounded by love. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to play such a small part in their lives. Regards, Shax. When the project opened and we'd handed it back, we thought, what do we do from here? We had 3 options. 40K could say, we've done what we wanted to. Let's shut it down. Let's resume our corporate careers. 2, we could just continue to punch out a school every 5 or 6 years. Or 3, we could really try and think how we can create some innovation to apply what we've done to thousands of more children. And to get to that spot, we really had to be able to overcome 2 key challenges. One of those was understanding how to address this concept of scale. The second of those was understanding what the role of the Westerner was in doing this. Now, let me go through them in turn. On the concept of scale, what we did was fantastic. We built a school for 200 kids. It's going to change their lives. We're proud of that. But there's 8 million children not in school in India. So if we were to replicate the model we did at $400,000 a school, we'd have to build 50,000 Banyan schools at the cost of $20 billion. We had to find a more cost-effective way. The second thing was we had to really understand what is our role as foreigners when it comes to global poverty reduction. And to answer that question, I want to take you back to the quarry. Now, when we see pictures like this, I want you guys to put your hands up if you think, you know, these people are poor but they're happy. Who's been told that? A few people. Now, keep your hands up if you've seen those photos taken at night time. Not many. Come back to the quarry with me. You see, one night I'd been working all day, I'd gone back and I was starting to write in my journal. And there was this domestic that started in the hut next to me. Now, it would have only been from kind of here to here away. So I could almost hear their breathing. Now, this started as just a bit of a verbal altercation before it got louder and louder and louder, till all I could hear were these thuds and then silence. I just stood and froze. In that moment thinking, what is my role here? You see, on reflection, I thought that's exactly what overcomes us a lot of the time when we go over there and see shocking things. We have this instinct that goes, go in and fix it. Go in, break up the fight. When it comes to poverty, go in, just fix it. But what that neglects is the complications of the situation. Now, I'll start this by saying you can never, ever, ever justify domestic abuse. But the situation was far more complicated than what I gave it credit for. You see, when I was talking to the husband involved in the situation the next morning, he said that he'd been working in the quarry for 30 years. Every single bone in his body ached. He said that if he did not have a cheap bottle of brandy every night, he earned $1.80 a day, spent $1.50 of it on brandy. If he did not get that brandy, he couldn't sleep at night. If he couldn't sleep at night, then he couldn't get up the next morning. If he couldn't get up the next morning, he couldn't earn that small amount than he was to keep his family alive. All I'm saying is that the situation on the ground is so complicated that we can't just jump in there and pretend how to fix it without really understanding the context of it. So armed with these 2 things, we've got to scale more effectively and we've got to be able to understand what our role was in this fight around global poverty reduction. I thought we will be best if we position ourselves over there doing 2 things. Scale successful pilot programs, and 2, master the art of collaboration. Let me explain what that means. So this year, what we're doing, we found organisations that have developed brilliant curriculums, and we're going to help them roll out 9 libraries. We're going to put in 30 after-school tuition centres. We're going to train up 150 teachers and train 2 life skills coaches. Now, what we're going to do is scale that into new areas in South India, villages where they haven't had these services before. But the real value that we're going to be adding is in mastering the sense of collaboration. You see, when we were working over there, we threw everything into the project and didn't realise what was actually happening around us. But take a single girl in a village in India right now. She might be lucky enough to be getting an access to a library. But how good would the impact be on her if she actually received the benefit of all these things? Because then it's not just an education program she's getting an education package. Now, to really pull this into context, we built a school for 200 kids that cost $400,000. This year, we are extending our reach to over 5,000 children in South India for the cost of $75,000. And when I figured that out, you know what I thought? It was not that we built a school, that we actually learned how to build a process. We learned how to go about bringing change to the developing world in a way that you're going to mitigate risks and actually achieve results. That's what we're taking forward. Now, in wrapping up, Pablo Picasso once said, "I begin with an idea and then it becomes something else." Well, that's exactly what happened to us. We were a bunch of kids. We thought it'd be a great idea to build a school. And we did. We went through the process and we did that. But now we've asked ourselves a bigger question. How do we roll out the most cost-effective, poverty-reducing education program so that it has an impact on hundreds of thousands of children? That is now our quest. And we need the best minds, we need the best ideas, and we need the best people to help us do that. And you know what? Will we get there? I don't know. I'm just a punter who built a school. Thanks very much.